I like to hike, just going out into the wilderness. My office job had finally started to grind on me the past few months, so this was a great way for me to get rid of some of that anxiety. It was late September, kind of a sweet spot for hiking where I live. Still some residual waves of heat from the end of summer, but also the calm breezes of early fall to balance it out. I was feeling dangerous that day. Didn't take a map or tell anyone where I was going. Just took off Saturday morning. It was a 3-day weekend, so I figured that was more than enough time to clear my head and be ready to face Tuesday morning without the gnawing desire to light the office on fire and jump out a window. I was going to hike along a path I'd read about on a message board. It was long enough to walk in a day, but had hundreds of miles of woods you could branch off into if you got bored. I left my car in a department store parking lot about a 10-minute walk from the entrance of the woods and set off. After about an hour of walking, I spotted a large tree stump near a clearing. Thinking now was as good a time as any, I sat down on the stump and looked around. Trees. Just trees. Everywhere I looked. The world could end and I'd be none the wiser. If only I could live out here. I could feel my back start to get tight just from thinking about having to get back to the office. It was still a good 3 days away, but just the fact that I knew it was there, just around the bend, made me grip the edges of the stump and breathe deeply. This is time just for you. You don't have to file anything right now. You don't have to collate anything right now. You don't need the 3-day project you were just given to be done by end of day just because Richard is trying to impress Mr. Jacobson. Unfortunately, my breathing exercises weren't working as well as I thought they would. I could feel all the sweat collecting on my lower back, making the snowman's face on my team-building shirt from the last winter invert into a demonic-looking Frosty. Suddenly, I heard something, like a branch snapping, loudly, deliberately. My head whipped around in the direction of the sound, but nothing was there. No deer or fox or big badger, just the trees and the sunlight that managed to breach the canopy. With my failing attempt at inner peace derailed completely, I got up and started walking again. 15 minutes later, it happened again. It definitely happened. I knew I wasn't crazy. A loud, deliberate snapping of a branch. I scanned the area completely, a full 360 spin, but nothing. No game was in season. At least, I didn't think there was any game in season. I didn't hunt, I just hiked. And I barely hiked, to be honest. I just wander aimlessly around the woods and try to focus on anything but the office. I was starting to get nervous. I was pretty far from anyone or anywhere. The closest civilization was over an hour away on foot. I hadn't brought a knife or even a pen to defend myself. But it was just a branch snapping. There's nothing out here to get me. While I was calming myself down, a smell hit me. It was strong. It was like metal. Going against my better judgment, I followed it. Over the underbrush and fallen logs, I moved towards the direction of the smell. I was about a minute down a path I wasn't familiar with when I heard the snap again. I was so desperate to catch what was making the sound that I wasn't paying attention and tripped over a rock. I was splayed out on the ground, holding my knee. I must have sprained it. As I tried to get to my feet, I realized I was face to face with a man lying prone on the ground. I screamed in shock as I struggled frantically to get up. Then the real screaming started when I saw that he was in 2 parts. His jeans were torn where his torso was separated from his legs. I recognized the smell now. Blood. Blood everywhere. There were huge chunks missing from his chest that seemed to have been bitten off. I threw up. Who was this guy? Who did this to him? Are they still around? I managed to find my feet, but pain was shooting through my leg. I had to get out of here. I'll just retrace my steps. I looked around desperately for anything familiar. I was just on the path. Where the hell am I? All I knew was that I had to get away. I'll just pick a direction and go. Hobbling as fast as I could, I started off. I limped for what seemed like an hour. If you go towards the direction of the sun, it's west, I think. I didn't know. I was in Cub Scouts for 2 weekends when I was 9, and then I found out I hated people, so I stopped being in Cub Scouts. I was trying to get as far away from that scene as possible. My legs were looking to give out now. I felt satisfied that I had covered enough ground and was safe. I slumped against a nearby tree and slid my back down it to sit down. Even the worst day in the woods is better than the best day at the office, I said to myself. That's when I heard this snap again. It sounded much closer this time. I was so tired and in so much pain, I just did nothing. I sat there and looked around, waiting for something to happen, to finally find out who's been following me this entire time. Nothing. Then a huge gust of wind blew through the trees and I felt someone right behind me. I looked up and almost passed out. It was huge. Its massive, muscular form was covered in brown fur. Its large eyes were black and red islands amidst an ocean of fur, just staring down at me. It must have been 10 feet tall and almost as wide. My mouth hung open and I just started screaming. The thing immediately put its huge hand over my mouth to silence the noise. Then it lifted me, effortlessly, with one arm and brought my face level with its wide, black and red eyes and blood-flecked fur. It opened its mouth to reveal countless large fangs.
Just once, I'd like you guys to not do that.
Took me a moment to realize that it was talking.
If I put you down, are you going to keep screaming?
I shook my head violently to indicate that I wouldn't. "What are you doing here?" was all my mind could think to say as it lowered me to the ground and took its giant hand away from my mouth.
What am I doing here? I've been here. For years, actually. This is my backyard. What are you doing here?
I just wanted to... The office. Richard, he...
Office. That's one of those... buildings, right?
Well, yes, it is.
And what do you do in this office?
I just do what they tell me to do and then they leave me alone. I was struck as I heard the words come out of my mouth.
That sounds awful.
He scratched his head with his massive hands.
And Richard?
Someone at the office I have to deal with.
So, he made you come out here. I mean, I'm out here because millions of years of evolution have made this my ideal environment. But you've been out here for less than 12 hours and you're already lost, injured, and alerting yourself to every predator in a 2-mile radius.
Richard didn't make me... Wait, how did you know I've been here for that long?
I see everyone that comes in here. Most are smart. Just get their fill of the trees and the birdies, then skedaddle off. Some are not so smart.
I thought of the bisected man. Did you kill that...
Guy with the jeans and the GoPro? Oh yeah, I snapped that guy in half like a twig.
Immediately, I felt my stomach drop into my shoes. Why?
Well, I was hungry.
He wiped his face with a pillar-like arm to smear away the blood around his mouth.
And he was stupid. Snapping pictures. Yelling about how he finally found it. Just stupid, loud things.
He stared at me for a few seconds.
You don't have a camera, do you?
As he said this, he palmed the trunk of the tree next to him and cracked it in half like a toothpick. Immediately, the snapping sound that had followed me almost all day rung throughout the woods as he gently and silently placed the tree down onto the dirt. No, I don't.
Great. So, are you going to tell anybody about me?
No.
Are you going to anonymously tell anybody about me?
No.
Do you know how fast a bear can cover ground?
No. Wait, what?
Most bears you're looking at are able to clock about 60 miles per hour. As you can see,
He gestured to himself and the tree he just fell.
I'm a lot bigger and a lot stronger than the bears you're going to be looking at. I'm also surprisingly fast. Fast enough that you had no idea I was about 20 yards away from you ever since you broke through the safe zone and into my zone.
My eyes started to rapidly look around the thing, desperately looking for a way out. He apparently noticed.
Looking for a way out? I can give you a lift if you like. You came in by the entrance from the highway, right?
I just nodded my head. Before I knew what happened, I was grabbed and sitting on his shoulders. The trees flew by in a brown and green blur as I fought to stop my face from flying off. I felt like an astronaut during takeoff. Then, as quick as it began, it was over. He unceremoniously dropped me to the ground. I threw up almost instantly. He then reached down and tore off one of my pant legs. "Hey!" I instinctively shouted, wiping the vomit from my mouth, but was silenced with a stare of his eyes. His blood-red eyes.
Now, I've got something of yours. Now, I've got your scent. So you go back on your word. I can find you. Anywhere. And when I do, I'll eat you? I guess? I don't know. You're like a third my size. Anything I do is going to be scary and threatening. Just keep your mouth shut and stick to bemoaning your life.
He took a step back and then started to disappear. It seemed to be traveling up his body. First his legs were gone, then his arms, and then his head. All that was left were his eyes. They stared at me for a few seconds more. One of them winked, and with a gust of wind, he was gone. I put in my 2 weeks the day I got back. Richard couldn't believe it. He asked me if I really thought things through. I told him I had a life-changing experience out in the woods. He said he'd been looking for a hike to unwind and asked where. I told him. Also made a point to tell him the scenery was fantastic, so be sure to bring a camera.